In the lonely heart of Texas, a rancher discovers a mysterious woman bound and broken on his land, but when he frees her, he awakens something far more dangerous than fear itself. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Where are you watching from? Let's get started. The sun melted slowly into the red horizon, spilling gold over the endless Texas plains as Ethan cross-tightened the reins of his horse and guided it back toward the corral. The air carried that late summer dryness that burned the lungs, and even the wind seemed tired from sweeping the same fields for decades. Ethan was a man of few words, but his silence wasn't born from peace, it came from the weight of memories. The war had left him with scars no one could see, and though his ranch stood proud and prosperous, the emptiness in his chest was a constant companion. That night, as he rode home under the purple dusk, he saw something unusual near the fence line, a figure slumped in the dirt, half buried in dust and shadow. He dismounted cautiously, his boots crunching the dry earth as he approached. It was a woman. Her wrists were bound with frayed rope, her clothes torn, her face marked with dried blood and exhaustion. When he knelt beside her, her eyes fluttered open, green, wild, and trembling. A whisper slipped from her cracked lips, fragile as wind. "Untie me, I crave." Ethan hesitated, unsure if he had heard her right. The words hung in the air, strange and desperate. He cut the ropes carefully, carried her to his horse, and rode back toward his ranch as thunder growled in the far distance. Inside the cabin, he laid her on a cot, wrapped her in a blanket, and lit the oil lamp. She was alive but barely conscious, breathing shallow and fast. He fetched water, cleaned her wounds, and waited for dawn to reveal what kind of trouble had found its way to his land. Morning came sharp and clear, and with it, the stranger's voice. She told him her name was Lydia Moore, a traveler who had been attacked and left for dead somewhere near the state line. Her story was neat but fragile, like a patchwork quilt that didn't quite fit. Ethan didn't press. He knew better than to chase answers before someone was ready to give them. Still, there was something about her, something fierce beneath the fear. Her eyes scanned everything, every sound, every creak of the windmill outside. She moved like someone who had lived in danger for too long. Ethan caught himself watching her more than he wanted to. He told himself it was because she might be lying. Deep down, though, he knew it was something else entirely, something he couldn't name. Days passed. She regained her strength slowly, helping him in the barn, brushing the horses, mending fences as though she had done it all her life. But at night, he'd hear her pacing the floor, whispering things under her breath. Once, when the wind pushed the cabin door open, he heard her cry softly, her voice shaking with both fury and shame. "Untie me," she murmured again, "I crave freedom." The words haunted him. There was no one to hear but him in the empty sky, and still, they echoed in his chest. One night, unable to bear the silence, Ethan brought her supper and asked, "What are you running from, Lydia?" She looked at him, eyes glistening in the lamplight, and said softly, "Not what, Ethan?" "Who?" Before he could ask, headlights cut through the window. A black SUV rolled up the dirt road, its engine idling low and heavy. Two men stepped out, suits, sunglasses, and the unmistakable chill of authority. Ethan's instincts kicked in like a reflex. Government men. He had seen their type before, back when the military still owned his life. He walked out onto the porch, rifle slung low across his chest. "Can I help you?" he asked. The taller of the two flashed an ID badge too fast for him to read. "We're looking for a woman. Escaped federal custody. Dangerous. You'd better tell us if you've seen her." Ethan's stomach sank. He glanced back at the cabin window and saw Lydia's shadow freeze in fear. "I haven't seen anyone," Ethan lied, voice steady as stone. The man stepped closer, his boots pressing into the mud. "If she's here, you're harboring a threat to national security." Ethan raised his rifle slightly, not enough to aim, but enough to make his meaning clear. "This is private land. You're trespassing. Leave." The men studied him for a long moment, then retreated to their SUV, tires spitting gravel as they drove off into the dark. Ethan waited until the sound faded before he turned toward the barn. Lydia stood there, barefoot, rain slicking her hair, trembling. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. "Now they'll come for both of us." He stepped closer, his voice low, calm, like the man he used to be before the world turned cruel. Then we'll be ready, he said. But inside, he wasn't sure what kind of storm he had just welcomed onto his land. The woman he had untied from her ropes might not just be a victim, she might be something far more dangerous. And before the next sunrise, he would discover how deep that danger ran. Ranch soaked in silence and smoke from the lanterns Ethan had kept burning through the night. Lydia sat at the edge of the barn loft, her damp hair clinging to her face, her eyes locked on the open plains as if watching for ghosts. Ethan stood below, leaning against a post, turning over every word the men in suits had said. Escaped custody. Dangerous. The words didn't fit the woman he'd seen mend fences with patience or cradle injured horses with quiet care. Yet, something deep inside him told him the truth was far more complicated. He climbed the ladder and handed her a mug of black coffee, his voice rough from the long night. They'll be back. You know that. She nodded slowly, her hands trembling slightly. Yes, and this time, they won't ask questions. They'll just take me. Ethan studied her face, the calm determination beneath the exhaustion. Then you better tell me what they want with you, he said. Lydia stared into her coffee before whispering, You ever heard of Project Crave? He frowned, shaking his head. Sounds like some government nonsense. She gave a humorless laugh. That's one way to put it. It was a classified experiment. They wanted to make soldiers who couldn't break, who didn't feel pain, fear, or hesitation. They called us volunteers, but most of us didn't know what we were signing up for. They rewired us, isolated us, tied us down, deprived us of touch and light until our minds cracked open. Then they filled the gaps with obedience. Ethan's jaw tightened. They did that to you. She nodded. They made me something between human and weapon. But when I started to remember who I used to be, they called it a malfunction. Outside, the morning light began to bleed over the horizon. Dust lifted from the road. Ethan caught sight of movement far off, a glint of metal under the sun. Trucks, he muttered. Lydia tensed, every muscle alert. It's them. Ethan's heartbeat quickened, but his voice stayed steady. Get to the cellar. I'll buy time. She grabbed his arm, eyes fierce. No, I'm done hiding. He looked into those eyes that once begged to be untied, and saw the strength of someone who had endured the unendurable. Without another word, he handed her a revolver from his duffel bag, a relic from his Marine days. Then let's make them regret coming here. The first truck roared through the gate, followed by another. Men in tactical gear poured out, moving like shadows in formation. Ethan fired the first shot, shattering the windshield of the lead vehicle. Chaos erupted, the air filled with gunfire, dust, and smoke. Ethan moved with deadly precision, years of training alive again in his veins. But Lydia, she was something else entirely. She moved faster than reason, slipping between shadows, her reflexes impossibly sharp. A man lunged at her with a taser. She caught his wrist midair and twisted, disarming him with effortless grace. For a second, Ethan forgot to breathe. Then, something impossible happened. One of the attackers froze mid-step, his body trembling violently as Lydia stared into his eyes. Her voice came low, foreign, commanding, like a code waking up buried circuits. The man dropped his weapon and turned his gun on his own comrades. Ethan shouted her name, but she didn't hear. She was lost in the power that had been forced upon her. When the gunfire finally ceased, smoke coiled around them like fog, the barn walls riddled with holes, and silence fell heavy as judgment. Lydia stood among the fallen, her chest heaving, her face streaked with ash and tears. Ethan ran to her, grabbing her shoulders gently. Lydia, hey, look at me. You're okay. She blinked, the haze in her eyes fading. They wanted me to be this, she whispered. But I'm still me. I have to believe that. He nodded, pulling her close, his voice breaking. You're human, Lydia. You're free. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the faint wail of sirens rose in the distance. Reinforcements, maybe worse. Lydia looked toward the horizon, determination replacing fear. They'll never stop, Ethan. Not until this secret dies or is exposed. He glanced at the truck still burning near the fence. Then we expose it, whatever it takes. They gathered what little they could. Maps, a hard drive pulled from the SUV, Lydia's lab ID half-burned but legible. As they rode out on horseback, the sky turned orange with the rising sun. Smoke curled behind them like a trail of ghosts. Lydia looked back once at the ranch, her voice breaking softly. I didn't ask to be made this way. Ethan looked over at her, his expression steady. You didn't, but maybe you were made to end it. She met his gaze, and for the first time, her lips curved into a faint, fragile smile. The wind swept across the plains, carrying with it the echoes of gunfire and the promise of a reckoning yet to come. As they disappeared beyond the ridge, Ethan felt something stir inside him, a strange mixture of awe and fear. He had untied her hands once, thinking he was freeing a broken soul. But in truth, he had unleashed something far greater, a woman forged in captivity, reborn in fire, and bound for vengeance. The world would remember Lydia Moore not as an experiment or a fugitive, but as the spark that turned silence into storm. And as the horizon swallowed them whole, Ethan finally understood what she had meant that first night. Untie me, I crave. It had never been a plea for rescue, it had been a cry for freedom.